Can you survive the longest walkable route on Earth? As a big geography guy, I've thought about this way too many times. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Thanks, Reed Schultz Geo. We're talking about going from the very tip of South Africa all the way up here to the Russian Siberian wilderness. I actually don't know what part scares me the most. Is this just like an inherent man trait to think that we all can do this? I don't know why I think I could legitimately do this. Moving up through certain parts of Africa will obviously be pretty dodgy. Going through the Sahara Desert, though, is terrifying, and then obviously going through Syria is gonna be pretty messy. And then most of the journey is gonna just take place through Russia. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is so stupid. Is it dumb? I think I can do this, though. I don't know.
This journey from Cape Town, South Africa to Magadan, Russia has never been completed by any human before.
Really?
Because of the many dangers along its
Oh, don't put that into my head. I already know what I'm gonna do for 2025. This would be a crazy like vlog series.
To pull it off? This route covers a total of 14,000 miles, and Google says this route would take more than.
Well, there already is a man. This reminds me of the man that ran from South Africa to, I think, Morocco, but that was on the western side of the continent, of course. That was Russell Cook, who ran the full length of Africa in less than a year. Again, from a geopolitical perspective, I can see why this route would be a little bit more simpler than going through the east. The east got a lot of messy things going on.
4,600 hours, or about 190 days of continuous walking to complete. Keep in mind that this doesn't
if it took the other guy almost a year, it's going to take like 3 years.
Comes out to around 3.5 years of travel. But anyways, let me show you what this trip would look like. Beginning in South Africa and moving into Botswana, your expedition would start out fairly safe. The next countries of Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania are all considered relatively safe, and the only dangers you would face would be the potentially dangerous wildlife and of course the heat. However, once you
it's going to get so much. You haven't even got to the giant, most biggest desert in the world.
Uganda, you reach your first real problem. This is because Uganda is known for its rampant robberies as well as having poor healthcare. On top of this, Uganda has some of the highest rates of malaria in the world.
Disease is a whole other thing I didn't expect.
By the wrong mosquito, you would have to end your journey right there and seek help. Now this might seem bad, but the next step of your journey gets
Aren't
even
there vaccinations
worse.
you could, I mean, there are going to be if you go into Africa, but that, I mean, I don't know if that's really going to help you in this situation. Also, I have really weak skin. If that's not, obvious enough, my skin, why do I think I can do this? My skin can't even last 7 seconds in the sun, let alone 3 years.
South Sudan, arguably the most dangerous part of your journey.
This is where I thought
unrest is ongoing in the country, while shootings, kidnappings, and robberies aren't uncommon. If you miraculously make it through South Sudan unscathed, you still have to make it through regular Sudan, which is still pretty dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, this is where
being your biggest threat.
Not to mention is you don't have just political problems. You have the environment itself. It's gonna get so hot.
The heat as you make your way through the scorching hot Sahara Desert and into Egypt. Egypt's Sinai Peninsula is pretty dangerous and is known for having political instability and attacks on civilians.
Yeah,
assuming you made it through there with no setbacks, your next step is to enter an active war zone.
Do you have to go through that? Part two. I wish I could make the route myself. Obviously, it'd be much longer, but like, I think there's a better way, a more safe path you could probably choose from. Okay, so far we're starting kind of at the midway point, but not really.
All the way from Cape Town, South Africa to Israel, where you're now going to have to make your way through an active war zone. Regarding Israel's political state during its current conflict with Palestine, it would be best to make your way through to Jordan as fast as you can. You make sure to avoid the Gaza Strip in Palestine, and soon enough, you make it out of Israel. Lucky for you,
you might still get caught in some crossfire, but Jordan is.
But unfortunately, this safety won't last long.
Oh my goodness, if go Syria.
Another huge
Holy crap!
Syria is one of the most dangerous countries.
Oh man, once you break it down like this, I'm realizing how
throughout the country.
I'm realizing how bad this would actually be.
You'll be subjected to the threat of potential kidnappings.
Can I use like
things get back
I don't know a car instead?
Turkey and then Georgia.
Turkey probably Turkey fine.
Mountain range to
Georgia fine.
Arrive into Russia. Russia is currently
especially that part of Russia.
Imagine it's not too welcoming to newcomers.
Goodness.
It's important for you to stay
I'm
away
pretty
from
sure they would arrest me.
Under the rare
They'd be like, what is this random American man doing? Especially if they see the things I've said online. Oh boy, I'm going to a gulag.
What lies ahead will be the most dull portion of your journey, as you'll be hiking for 6 months.
Yeah, but at least you're saying like that part is just into the wilderness. Like it's going to test my survivability skills in nature and stuff like that, which I have none.
Almost nobody lives in this part of the world, so it's unlikely that.
But at least you don't have to worry about the political strife.
If you survived every single thing,
actually, you have to worry about polar bears though.
Don't freeze to death in the city of Ticus, where the average temperature in the early months of the year can get as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit. If you stick it through the cold and up into Magadan, congratulations, because you've just done something that nobody else in human history has ever done before.
Dang, how has nobody done this? That's weird to me, but it's probably because it's almost impossible. Yet again, the man brain inside me says, be the first one, Drew. Imagine getting nuked from a nuclear bomb test in the part of Russia where nobody's there. Burp, I know what we're doing today. Fun fact, negative 40 degrees Celsius is the same as negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. This is just the normal dad path to school, right? Again, that was by Reed Schultz Geo. Why are so many U.S. states split in two?
I mean,
North Dakota, South Dakota,
Carolinas.
Carolinas.
And 2 Dakotas.
Well, the Virginia situation is because of the Civil War. I think it's a lot more different than the Dakotas and Carolinas.
So what's the reason for all these states dividing? Well, for 2 of these cases, the answer is pretty straightforward. For example, both North and South Carolina were once part of the single British territory of Carolina and mutually agreed to split up mainly because of differing economic focuses. Similarly, both North and South Dakota were once part of the large Dakota territory and split up for the simple reason that splitting into 2 states would allow for more representation in Congress than just one. However, when it comes to why Virginia and West Virginia are 2 different states, the answer becomes a little
There's actually a little bit more history there.
Instead of a territory simply being carved up, this split actually resulted from West Virginia forcefully seceding from Virginia, and to understand why, we need to go back to the early 1860s, when nearing the beginning of the Civil War, Virginia broke away from the northern U.S. to join the Confederate States of the South.
Unfortunately, West Virginia is not doing too well right now, but
still loyal to the Union, so they severed
the way their independence came is very noble, obviously.
The state, and were admitted to the Union as a brand new one. Although, because they shared history with Virginia, they decided to keep the same name.
Don't forget also Virginia used to be a really, well, technically when it first started, it used to be a giant state. Well, I guess a lot of the states used to be giant states. Very long boys. Look at that, Connecticut. But these were, of course, just land claims. But everyone always talks about this map for the giant Virginia. It reminds me of Louisiana, or the Louisiana Purchase. That state technically has, I think, the most right to become mega state again if they want. West Virginia actually justified their separation from the Confederacy using Virginia's own declaration of secession from the Union against them. West Virginia is also one of the poorest states, which is kind of surprising because they are surrounded by states that are economically very strong. Yeah, I kind of talked about that. Unfortunately, West Virginia is dealing with not the greatest situation over there right now. Differing economic focuses is a wild way of saying slavery, yeah. Not a single country in Europe wants to own this piece of land.
So what could possibly be so bad about possessing it?
This is reminding me of the same situation that's occurring between Egypt and Sudan. They're specifically talking about this smaller part. That's because if one country claims this smaller part, then the other country would want the bigger part. Basically, they want the triangle. But apparently there's a lot of no man's land or land nobody wants around the world. Not say you can just come here and claim this, so that would be a bad idea.
7 square kilometer unclaimed area is sandwiched in between Croatia and Serbia. And to understand how this all happened, we have to go back to the early 1900s.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going back to Yugoslavia.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire is at its absolute peak. You see, within the empire, the government decided to split the ethnic groups of the Croats and the Serbs along the Danube River. And at the time, this border wasn't an issue.
Won't be a bad idea.
As the next century passed by, Austria-Hungary would find itself breaking apart into smaller
the Lego break sound effect
until both Croatia and Serbia were independent countries. Problems started to arise when the countries noticed that the river which once divided their borders had changed its course completely, and this resulted in a lot of land changing possession.
What rivers do?
Which went to Serbia. Croatia wasn't too happy.
And the problem is,
you're
talking about Balkan countries and Balkan ethnic groups. Yeah, they're not going to just let things go. A lot of history here.
The path of the river as it flowed 100 years ago. These 2 different claims of country borders resulted in a few clashing, disputed regions, as well as one big region that neither country claimed. This technically means that anybody could just create their own country.
No, don't do that. Trust me, that'd be a bad idea. Yo, where are you from? Oh, I'm from free unclaimed land, bro. What could be so bad about possessing it? It's sandwiched in between Croatia and Serbia. Literally, there's nothing worse. People tried claiming it, they got arrested and escorted out of the country. Don't be dumb, people. I don't even think the UK is brave enough anymore to try to take this. The one place in the US where everything is legal.
In the US where any crime is legal, and for this reason, this area has literally
between Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming.
All of this takes place in Yellowstone National Park.
This reminded me of those zones, those unoccupied what was it? During the lockdowns, people were like creating their own little countries inside of like states in the Northwest. I don't think this has anything to do with that.
As you can see, most of the national park land resides solely in the state of Wyoming. However, if you look a bit closer, you can see that it's hiding a pretty big secret. You see, there are small portions of the national park that go beyond Wyoming and barely stretch into the states of both Montana and Idaho. These weird overlapping borders would be considered pretty strange on their own, but what makes them special is this 50 square mile piece of land in Idaho. This is a place where no crime that gets committed could be legally punished, and all this stems from a loophole in how the laws are written.
I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't know. I feel like the government would probably figure out something if you did something horrific enough. So don't get any crazy ideas, even though I am kind of right now.
If a crime is committed anywhere in the US, the trial jury legally has to be made up of people belonging both to the state and the district where the crime was committed. However, since not a single person lives in both the state of Idaho and the district of Yellowstone National Park, no jury can be assembled, which means that no trial can legally be held to prosecute a criminal.
Meh, like I said, they'd probably figure it out. I'm just saying, man, 12 million people watch this. There's a lot of people with some crazy ideas right now. Ignore the whole existence of the federal court. You will be tried in federal court. Isn't that like when you commit a crime off like out in the ocean and something like that? Like that, they'll figure it out. Charged by U.S. Marshals for years in that area. Federal grand juries is much more severe than local jury. But officer, the TikTok guy said I could. I thought it was America. 95% of Chinese people live east of this line. We've talked about this.
5% inhabit this western.
I mean, that's pretty obvious. It all comes down to geography. I'm gonna make a video one day just talking about how like geography affects everything and how geography, it's a good subject. Like it's so often overlooked. Math is important, of course. English is important, but geography, if you really know it really, really well, I mean, you can really predict so much about what goes on in the world and why it acts the way it does.
This western side is only home to 70 million people, which might seem like a lot until you realize that just across this line, you'll find a total of more than 1.3
you got a lot of fresh water over there too.
Which for comparison is almost 4 times the population of the United States. The reasons for this population.
Yeah, but the US has 2 oceans on both sides. There's a reason to move out west. There's not much of a reason for the Chinese people to move out west or like to Tibet, for example.
Asian divide can all be attributed to China's geography. You see, thousands of years ago in ancient China, civilization was mainly centered around these 2 rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, which provided this eastern region with some of the best farmland in the entire
historical
world.
Chinas have been
plentiful rain and the
close
warm
to the
climate
coastline.
year-round. These are essentially the perfect conditions for humans to live in. Fast forwarding thousands of years, you can start to see how so many people ended up here. On the contrary, the eastern side of China is home to some of the driest deserts on the planet, mainly because the Himalayas acts as a barrier, blocking all monsoons from the south from making their way into China. Furthermore, the harsh cold air coming from Siberia shifts the temperatures of this region far beyond what can sustain a growing population.
Yeah, I mean, even planes don't even fly over this region. Like, why would humans want to live there? Humans don't want to live in places hard to live in. Like the Sahara Desert, for example. Also hard for humans to live in mountains, by the way. That's crazy how 70 million people can be considered only 5% of the population of one country. Yep, that's how it goes for China and India, too. Using Minecraft wheat for farming is a pro-gamer move. Meanwhile, Australia has 97% of its land empty. Don't even get me started about population density in Australia. Also because of a giant desert. Okay, I'm so excited to talk about this topic. One of the strangest borders, if not the strangest in the world. I love talking strange panhandles. It's kind of similar to the one here in Afghanistan. Its little tail over this way. My research behind this dates back to 2 centuries ago with the Russian Empire and the British Empire. They rightly so figured that would be a very big problem if those 2 giants touched. So having Afghanistan here as a neutral space was probably a good idea. So yeah, that's the reason for this little tail, keeping those 2 separate, which is funny nowadays because you can't even tell because the borders have changed so much.
Notice this one country that has possibly the most awkward border in the world, a panhandle stretching almost 300 miles away from its main landmass. You see, this is Namibia, and there's actually a pretty funny story about why this border exists, but to understand it, we need to travel all the way back
It's more weird, I gotta be honest, than the Afghanistan tail, just because it gets even thicker over this way. Of course, it all has to go back to the 1800s.
Africa, including Namibia, except they noticed a huge problem. You see, for the Germans to travel from this colony to German East Africa, they needed to take this extremely long voyage all the way around the African continent.
However, remember that was formerly a part of the German Empire. They lost that after World War I. They also had Tanzania, but they also lost that after World War I. Which, fun fact, that's why there's a lot of German names still in use in that African country to this day, which sometimes that leads to a very awkward situation over there.
Realize that if they could just access the Zambezi River, this trip could be made 100 times easier.
That's so funny.
But the thing is, the only way to access this river was by going through Britain's territory, and since Germany couldn't just wander into another country, they decided that it would be a great idea for them to trade their island of Zanzibar to get this strip of land. However, in making this trade, what the Germans failed to realize was that this river that they thought was going to connect their 2 colonies was actually split down the middle by the largest waterfall in the world, making it physically impossible to traverse.
That is
the British,
so
on the
hilarious.
other hand, had known this for years and decided to trade this land with the Germans anyways, knowing it would be completely useless to them.
Classic British move there. I am not surprised. Dang Brits. No wonder Germany started World War I with them. The poor person who discovered the waterfall first. I can just imagine Hans screaming, "Ah!" This totally didn't make Germany mad, and they definitely didn't harbor any ill will. Germany and Britain would become great friends in the 20th century. Germany rarely made mistakes, but when they do, theirs are world class. Literally, this is the German villain arc origin story. Since Germany couldn't wander into another country because Germany didn't wander into Namibia uninvited either, right? Absolutely love these videos. Please go subscribe to this channel. And big thanks to my patrons. Month 3 in Drew's basement. Drew's Argentinian Grandpa, ZaneyBoi, KirinoIsBestGirl, the Mexican 760, Tambre, NordTyrol, Luxembourg, Lucas, the Canadian Christmas Goose, Honk, InquisitorXarius, Fredrik Tibblin, Pavlik, Carmel Saida, and Archaeology.